Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. However, the ultimate result was a complete letdown. They remark that my songs are now too long. He's been referred to as a poet, a prophet, and a ghost who changed the norms of celebrity. Bob Dylan has been the music industry's enigmatic figure for more than 60 years. Always on the go, constantly observing, and rarely giving away too much. However, Dylan has shocked even his closest confidants today. He has named the 6 rock women who influenced his spirit. This is more than just a list. It is a roadmap of inspirations, heartaches, obsessions, and silent admiration. These are not arbitrary preferences. These women left their names and songs etched in his mind. Some stayed with him longer than he will ever acknowledge, while some he knew and others he pursued. A force of gravel and fire, the first woman he named once caused him to pause just by being around her. Janice Joplin was that woman. Like a comet, he saw her burst upon the scene, flaming and burning, then departing too soon. Dylan never forgot her, even though they only had a few encounters. He marveled at her suffering, her untamed nature, and the way she cried out each line as if it were her final request. He once claimed that she sung as though she was aware of her limited time, and he was haunted by that. Janice was more than a blues singer. Before the world, she was a soul unraveling. Additionally, Dylan, who didn't often wince, was startled by how comfortable she was bleeding in public. Then a quieter person arrived, whose lyrics were even more profound, despite the fact that she never raised her voice. Joni Mitchell was the woman in question. They fought. Everyone is aware of it. However, not many people are aware of Dylan's admiration for her. Joni exceeded all expectations in the sector. Intelligent, defiant, and brilliant. Once on stage, she called him out, challenged him, and even made fun of him. Dylan, however, kept her documents private despite the ego battles and scathing remarks. He studied and listened. Joni transformed lyrics into literary works. Melody felt like a razor because of her. Her songwriting compelled him to elevate the standard, even though he never said it out. He named someone unexpected after Joni. Yes, she was a rock star, but she was also a person who brought him joy when he didn't realize it. He named someone unexpected after Joni. Yes, she was a rock star, but she was also a person who made him smile when he didn't realize it. Stevie Nicks is her name. She was dubbed the Velvet Hurricane by him. In the late 1970s, they went on a brief tour, cigarette smoke, late-night tour buses, and laughter with a hint of whiskey. Dylan was intrigued to Stevie's inconsistencies because she was both magical and mythical. She had no intention of proving anything. She was simply holding cards that included images of mules, the Jack of Diamonds, and the Ace of Spades. And he heard freedom in her words. He was unable to describe or contain this sort of feminine turmoil. She created music that seemed to float while still having a thunderous impact. Then he revealed a name that took everyone by surprise. A woman with rock blood but country origins. That was Linda Ronstadt's voice. Dylan loved how she phrased things, how clear she was, and how she refused to be someone else. There was strength and grace instead of showboating or a desperate attempt to become famous. They never collaborated, but he continued to observe from the background as usual. At one little theatre, he sat by himself in the back row to listen to her sing Blue by You. He allowed her speech to envelop him like smoke while he was concealed behind a sweatshirt. He claimed that it brought back memories of his original motivation for writing. Her delivery contained a sacred element. He was deeply moved by an emotional precision that went beyond 1,000 laughs. Linda lived them rather than only singing them. She provided nostalgia with a backbone and sadness with a pulse. She was a guide and a ghost to Dylan. A woman who somehow always sounded timeless and never attempted to change the tone of her voice to suit the times. He was slightly shaken by the intensity of his emotions as he listened. It brought back memories of the purity he formerly sought after in each verse. Suddenly, his face changed because not all of the names were simple. One in particular changed, the expression on his face, a blend of hurt, pride, and an unsolved issue. However, not every name was simple. One in particular caused his face to change in expression, a concoction of hurt, pride, and an unsolved issue. Patti Smith was that person. They shared a friendship. Competitors, two figures in the smoky New York scene's underbelly, traveling different routes that somehow always ended at the same door. The poet who straddled the boundary between prayer and punk was Patti. Where he was silent, she was loud. Where he smoldered, she burnt. They weren't always in agreement. They were not required to. He wasn't idolized by Patti. She asked him questions. She made him feel something other than legendary by pushing and challenging him. And Dylan, accustomed to being revered, found that to be both exciting and unnerving. He believed she might be the only one who genuinely grasped the weight of myth during their late-night talks, unanswered letters, and nods across dimly lit bars. Patti understood what it was like to be observed, analyzed, and immortalized before her tale was even partially finished, even if she didn't want to become him. Dylan once remarked that although Patti didn't sing, she dared to compose a lyric that would make your spine hurt. Every line is a plea for help. Every performance has a cost. He knew he couldn't tame her, so he never tried, and perhaps he didn't want to, in his heart. Patti Smith wasn't merely a peer after all. She was a reflection, one that exposed rather than flattering. The last name comes last. He kept one for last. She might have meant the most, not because she meant less. It was Emmylou Harris, soft power. Dylan characterized her like that. The woman who, without ever speaking, had the ability to light up a room. They frequently came into contact. They alternated between passing each other in hotel corridors and green rooms that smelled of sweat, stale coffee, and fading dreams, and occasionally exchanging microphones under stage lights. Emmylou was quiet when she spoke. She didn't have to. Dylan famously claimed that all it took to silence a throng was a single breath. Yes, there was shame in her, but there was also seriousness. She transformed grief into something sacred and carried pain like a hymn. She never made an effort to win him over. She did so for precisely that reason. She carried songs that sounded like prayers while walking lightly across a field bloated with pomp and ego. Dylan claimed that Emmylou had a deeper understanding of quiet than the majority of songwriters did of music. She wasn't being submissive. It was rebellion, an unwillingness to yell merely to be heard. He admired her not only as a vocalist, but also as a sort of spiritual mirror who showed him that silence could roar in the right hands and that music didn't have to be loud to reverberate eternally. Dylan saw Emmylou as evidence that rock and roll could still embrace purity and that the most subdued voices can make the biggest impressions. Dylan saw these six ladies as more than simply rock stars. They were mirrors held up at angles no one could predict, teachers and echoes. They all presented him with unique challenges, some with words that pierced like scripture, some with fire, and some with quiet. He was questioned about reality, purpose, and the unseen thread that ties art into folklore for the rest of his life. Furthermore, Dylan is not merely attributing credit when he names these six. Something sacred is being revealed by him, a secret roadmap of influences that molded him as a man and as a writer. Dylan is now guiding us to their solutions in a world that has always turned to him. Perhaps the true tale lies not in his words, but rather in what inspired him to speak. Not in a way of worship or comparison, but in a way of listening. To hear Joni's brilliance, Janis's suffering, Stevie's mystery, Linda's clarity, Pat's revolution, and Emily's reverent reserve. Dylan wasn't the only one inspired by these voices. In ways that only a mirror or a muse can, they rattled him, tempered him, and caused him to doubt his own voice. And because it turns out that even stories have their gods, perhaps we should listen to them now, not as background, but as prophecies. He simply gave them names,